This one's probably going to ruffle a couple of feathers because I think, at least for myself, backpacking quilts, I think they're a little bit overrated, and I want to tell you why. So in this video, that's what I'm talking about. And if you don't know who I am, my name's Emery. Thanks for being here. I just want to help you get better at backpacking. Backpacking is something that I absolutely love doing. I've hiked the PCT. I've done a number of different things. I have a well-rounded view of what I think backpacking is and is not. And one of the things that I see people talk about a lot is quilts versus sleeping bags. Before we go any further, let's just talk about sleeping quilts real fast, what they are and where they came from. A sleeping quilt came from the hammocking world. To the best of my knowledge, that's where they came from. It's basically a sleeping bag without a zipper, and you just lay it over yourself. Sometimes it has a foot box, sometimes it doesn't, but it's a great way to cut weight by cutting out a zipper, the weight of a zipper in fabric that you don't technically need. Notice the air quotes. And in all honesty, people that have switched from a sleeping bag to a quilt, if they have trouble sleeping in a bag or they don't like bags, they swear by them. And a lot of people really, really enjoy them. Now, everyone has their own preference. Everyone likes what they like. And I think that's awesome. But I also think that there's a lot that people don't talk about in regards to quilts that are downsides. And I think people put so much emphasis on spending the money on gear and they get emotionally attached to it that they stop being objective about the gear that they're buying. And I think that there are some major flaws with sleeping quilts that people need to know about before they either purchase one, or if they have purchased one and that they're not being honest about. And I'm basing this off my personal experience. Let me just tell you a quick backstory. I have always liked sleeping bags. I've never had a problem with them, but I like to try new gear out. So I decided to get a sleeping quilt. Now, I did not pay for the quilt. It was given to me to try out. So I really have no financial dog in the fight. I can be completely objective. Doesn't even matter the type of brand. I'm just talking functionality at this point. So I got this quilt, had it designed. It's a great quilt. It's an Enlightened equipment. Awesome, awesome quilt. Weighs hardly nothing. It's a 20-degree quilt. So the first time I used this, I was not impressed. I was colder than I usually am in a sleeping bag. And I thought, well, maybe I'm just doing it wrong, or maybe it was just a cold night. Maybe my body was off. Well, I used it a number of other times and I felt the same way. I just was not comfortable. I kept getting drafts and things like that. And I came back from a trip at one point and a buddy of mine said, oh, well, you need to put the straps on your sleeping quilt so that it stays, so that it cuts out on drafts. And I was like, well, that doesn't really make any sense. If my reason for jumping from a sleeping bag to a quilt is for freedom of movement, why would I then want to strap myself back down to a pad? But I did it anyhow. I went back out and it was a little bit better, but I still was like, I don't really know about this whole quilt scenario. And in between all these different trips, I would switch back to a sleeping bag. And every time that I did, I'd go back to my Kuyu 30-degree sleeping bag. And I was just so much more comfortable. And it dawned on me after a while that there's a major flaw with quilts. You're missing a massive portion of your sleeping bag when you go to a quilt. In fact, you're missing the entire bottom of it. And I know a lot of people argue that the fabric that you lay on under your quilt is useless. But I would argue that it's not useless. It's in fact very, very important, because that fabric, while you may be crushing the insulation, it keeps that warm body air inside your bag. You can zip it shut, with a little hood, and you keep all of that warm air that your body is warmed up in that bag. Whereas with a quilt, if you need to retain that heat on a cold night, anytime you move, at a bare minimum, you put yourself at risk for dumping heat accidentally. And then your body has to rewarm that air. And if you're doing that all night long, that's a lot of work for your body to do. At the end of the day, it's just uncomfortable. Now, I know a lot of people might say, well, I don't have that problem, whatever. Okay, that's great for you. That's wonderful. But for me, and I think a lot of people, if you're being honest with yourself, they probably have similar issues. If you're taking your quilt out into the backcountry and you're uncomfortable at night, why are you doing it? To save a pound, to save a half a pound? And in my case, I'm not even saving that much weight. I think I'm saving like 6 ounces. So a better night's sleep for me in my sleeping bag versus saving some weight just to wear a quilt because it's a hot new thing, I'm just not in. And I think that people really need to be objective about the gear that they bring. And this goes beyond just the quilt. This goes with your backpack, with your footwear, with whatever it is that you've mentally and emotionally and financially invested into. You have to be objective about your gear choices, or you're just wasting your time and your money. A good friend of mine who helps PCTers with an outfitting business, within the first few 100 miles of the PCT, tells me all the time how these hikers come through her shop emotionally attached to this gear that's not working for them anymore. They're blistered up, they're uncomfortable, and she has to sit there and convince them to look at it objectively, at their gear for what it is, not what they want it to be. So if you're looking to jump from a sleeping bag to a quilt, I would just ask, why are you doing it? What are you hoping to get out of it? And what are you willing to put up with? Now, again, a lot of people switch from sleeping bags to quilts because they want the freedom of movement, and a lot of people end up sleeping better. But there's at least one person in the world that did not sleep better. And I've actually spoken to a number of other people who've had the same experience. So be objective, consider your options. And if you do switch to a sleeping quilt and it doesn't work, be willing to switch back and not focus only on weight savings. Those are my thoughts on quilts. I think they're a great option for some people, not all people. I'd be curious what you guys think. If you think sleeping quilts are awesome, toss your comments below. Let me know what you think, if you think I'm crazy or not. But I just wanted to put this video out there because I think a lot of people have this gear pressure that they need to have this. And I just want to put your mind at ease that, hey, you don't need a sleeping quilt to be comfortable, especially if you're already comfortable. But if you are someone that wants to improve their sleep, it's worth a shot. Or if you just want to play around with gear, be sure to check out the links in the video description and on my bio, backpacking course, the website, the podcast, and the Facebook groups. Love to have you as a listener and would love to hear from you directly. So you can feel free to email me at emery@byland.co or leave a comment or shoot me a message. If you're headed out on an adventure anytime soon, be safe, make great decisions. We'll see you next time.